I'm Eli.
Robin.
Esther.
Haley.
So the first question was define at least two different motivation theories. And the first one that our group came up with was drive reduction theory, which states that humans have a physiological need, and when these needs are met, they create a drive, and that drive pushes us to reduce the need. So an example of physiological need would be food, which drives, and the drive would be hunger, and the hunger pushes one to eat to reduce the need. And the second one that we came up with was the arousal theory, which states that humans are motivated to engage in various behaviors that either increase or decrease their arousal level. For instance, high arousal level would motivate one to engage in behaviors that will lower these levels, and lower arousal levels will do the vice versa.
Okay, I had number 2. So that's identify 2 different motivational theories that we have observed and then give examples. So first one, we acknowledged that there was a drive reduction theory, and it was extremely prevalent in the opening of the third wave. Before Allison and all the volunteers went to Sri Lanka, they saw the wreckage of the tsunami had left, and their drive came from the village needing to restore their homeostasis. So the second theory was clearly evident by Maslow's theory, as the first need, physiological needs of food, water, and shelter, were prominently eliminated from the tsunami. The volunteers recognized that the villagers were at ground zero, so the first thing they could do was try to give them food and water to the best of their ability with what little supplies that they had. So they set up a kitchen. Even though they didn't have much, they knew what they needed to do. Donnie was later subjected to his own pyramid, as he put in so much work for others that he fell ill. He eventually, the stresses and the tensions really got to him, where he needed to go home and restore his own physiological and safety needs. Once he was able to rest and gain what he needed, he was able to go back and help some more. Allison showed a lot of love in the pyramid when she went back to help more, and she felt like she belonged there and she needed to be there to help those people, which is number 3 on Maslow's pyramid. Another large example of the pyramid is from number 4, which is esteem needs, where the volunteers were given recognition that they deserved before they left, and that was about the level that the new village was at after the tsunami.
And I'm doing 3, so it was discuss what emotions we experienced during the film and what motivation we had towards those emotions. And what I put was, we were overcome with the sense of helplessness, despair, uncertainty at times, sorrow, the constant feeling of uncomfortableness, anger, distracted, even grateful. And then finally there was joy and relief, and that came near kind of more of the end. The motivation that I felt towards these feelings is, the first one was, as soon as you see everything, is I was motivated I wanted to go help, to do something to try to give these people some type of hope. I mean, seeing all that, that's the first motivation that came after me. And then, right after, the next motivation that I felt was during the times when the villagers were arguing amongst themselves. I wanted to yell at them. I felt very angry. Didn't want any of that to, I wanted to try to fix that. And so that's what I felt during those times.
What I felt during these times was very motivated to go and do something myself. And that's kind of just a strike of passion that happened. I'm watching this and I'm like, wow, I could really make a change myself. Everybody can, is kind of what I was feeling. And it really brought everything back into perspective for me, as far as my little issues or things that I get irritated about on my day-to-day basis. And then I just kind of realized wow, I have food, I have a house, You know, I have people who love me, you know, even if I've lost people in my own life, I still have others that are there for me to help me through those times. And a lot of these people didn't have that. A lot of the kids didn't have their mom or dad around anymore. And it really just put things into perspective about how small my issues really are. And I think all of us sort of felt that. We had a discussion about that as well.
And I felt so helpless, especially because I have a child. And when I saw those kids and somebody saying that when a child says they have lost their mom, and it really just touched me inside. And I felt motivated to participate, like being a volunteer when we have like earthquakes or other issues around the world.
Yeah, okay. So I had question number 4, and that was to describe how the emotions motivated the volunteers and or the survivors. So the first example that I had was with Donnie, and there was 2 separate examples. So the first one is what motivated Donnie to leave the camp, the area. So I think because he was seeing all of the loss that was going on, it really made him appreciate and miss his own family back home. He said several times, I miss my wife, I miss my kids, I miss my country, and it brought him a lot of emotion, and it's really hard to see other people going through that and also miss that yourself, even if you're still able to go back to those people. So that was really hard for him. He needed to go back, he needed to bring back his, as Robin said, the pyramid. He needed to go back and get his emotional needs back in place so that way he could begin to help others again. Another way that emotions affected Donnie was when he was motivated to come back, and he said before he left that he always had a really hard time leaving a job unfinished, and he said that it wasn't even a quarter of the way done. And so he felt guilty, I believe is the emotion that he was feeling. And I also recognized how sad everybody else was feeling when he was leaving. There was several mothers, grandmothers, fathers, people crying and begging him to stay because of sort of the savior that he was for them. So I think that motivated him to come back. Another emotion that motivated someone was for the cameraman. I think his name is Sunil. I believe his motivation that he felt was the disparity that was going on in his country, in his area where he lived, and I think part of him wanting to record all this was so that way maybe somehow this would lead to a bigger picture, you know, having other people help their country. And another thing that motivated him was him just wanting to be the cameraman, so that way he wouldn't get involved with the volunteers, so he would not be tied between his country and the new volunteers. And we did see that as an issue. There was a woman who screamed at him and said, you need to do something, and he just says, I'm just the cameraman. I'm just here to capture this in order to somehow get us help. And I think a lot of the adults didn't recognize his role, but I think he had a very important role, especially because he was from Sri Lanka. You know, he wasn't someone from a different country coming in. This was where he was at. He wanted to get help. And my final example, before Eli has one, is when the adults of Sri Lanka started to become sort of selfish and unhappy with the way things were, as far as not getting a stable home. You know, they were living in temporary houses and things like that. They become really selfish and jealous of everybody else. And the volunteers, I believe Allison, Donnie, Bruce, I think everybody said this at one point, that they're doing this right now for the children. And I think anybody who's a parent, anybody who has younger siblings, anybody who knows a child would put that child first because of how helpless and innocent and vulnerable they truly are. They don't know how to take care of themselves. And we see throughout the whole documentary how much these adults were putting the children first with their schooling, playing with them on the beach, making them not afraid to go back to the ocean after they had this traumatic experience with the tsunami. So I think the adults were very motivated by the children's helplessness. And then Eli has an example as well.
One of the examples that I noticed was when Allison was, it was during week 16. Donnie had just previously left a while back, and they were trying to give money to the villagers, and they were going around giving money to certain villagers, and they were just randomly picking it so nobody would be favorites. And the villagers were starting to bicker amongst themselves and get mad at them and say that they were giving them to, hey, you're giving money to the rapists or the thieves, you're not helping. And they're just trying to say, we're just trying to help everybody, we're not just choosing and picking who we're helping. And eventually at one point, Allison, you could see her getting her emotion changed to anger, and she just said, we're not gonna give anybody else any money, nobody's getting any money, we're just gonna give food and water, just the necessities. And I think that was a big change, because throughout her whole role, you've just seen her be completely, helpful. She's always smiling. You didn't see her really in any despair. And then during those weeks where it got harder, you could see her break down more. Her angry, her not wanting to be around people threatening them. She had threats against her. So it's a big change compared to how it was in the beginning of them being so kind to her, to then, now they're greedy and they want better things and they need money in it. So that was one of the biggest things that I noticed.
And to add, the huge factor was the fact that the government either never got the money or they kept the money to themselves. And so I think everybody was just under so much pressure, and there was left up to few volunteers. So
It just seemed like a waiting game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
God,
Yeah.
it was
I
awful.
I personally felt so mad because I kept asking myself, where is all that billions of money going to? And they kept showing this minister, and I was like, what is he doing? He's supposed to be bringing the money so that he can help these people back.
He's gonna soon tie in a nice office, and
Right.
the rest of his country's in the slums.
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
All right,
That's
that's
it.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you.